My 8-year-old son does a little bit of that with YouTube.
Yeah.
He's watching people play whatever it is, if it's Roblox or whatever the games are. And I've noticed that when those influencers or gamers, whatever you want to call them, are speaking about brands that they're probably getting endorsed, all of a sudden my son's like, oh, we got to get KFC or we got to get this or whatever because this gamer he watches said it. You know what I mean? So like, and I got to admit, there's times where it's like, okay, he's talking about KFC like 20 times a week. Like, well, let's get it. You know what I mean? So it's actually affected the spend in my house personally, not hugely, but I mean, we made purchases that I would have never made based on that. So, that's part of it too, potentially.
That's interesting because when I was a kid, we didn't play a ton of video games, but I never wanted to watch someone else play a video game. I was waiting for my turn to play the video game or to play against somebody.
Well, if you're watching somebody, they were sitting right next to you. This is Restauranttopia.
David, how you doing?
I'm doing good, Brian. How you doing, man?
I hear you got a great episode.
I have a great episode.
I was reading the show notes.
Okay.
What today's data says about tomorrow's restaurant.
That's exactly right.
All right, good. I got that.
I got the opportunity to attend again another presentation by Circana. So Circana used to be NPD, but they're a data company.
And NPD.
Yeah, so
I don't know what that is.
They're a data company. Okay. And they primarily retail food service. This was a heavy food service driven conference that I was at, so it was a lot about the food service industry and what's happening with the data. Now a lot of it obviously is driven by national chains and high volume stuff. So some of it you have to kind of like weed through what's important. But it's always like every year when I go, I get the chance to hear this guy speak. I always like to bring it back and share it with the audience. So,
but good data that is really
actionable
things, and relevant to local independence.
Yeah, for sure. So it's things that you probably have heard a lot about, maybe some things that'll, pique some interest to look into further and just maybe make some tweaks and adjustments as we roll into 2026 and figure things out in the restaurant business. So
like more than just beef prices are going to be high for the next year.
Yeah, and it's less about market stuff, but more about like what's happened with how the consumer is buying and all those things like that. And we'll get into all this. So I'm excited. Cool. I'm excited to go into it. So
all right, lay it on me. What do you got?
Yeah, so the state of the consumer. So what they're saying is there's a new consumer reality out there. So basically, there's some economic uncertainty, which I think, we're kind of feeling that a little bit. At that conference, there was a bunch of distributors there. So, when I look at our business and customers being a little bit soft, there's some doing very well. But, in general, things are a little bit soft in the industry. Across the country, these members or the distributors I was with, they represent all over the country. A lot of them were saying the same thing. Now that doesn't make it feel better, but at least you're kind of like, okay, this isn't just Cleveland, Ohio, or just Ohio, or just the Midwest, or just,
And it's not like we're driving into Excuseville here and trying to say, if you're down 50%, like it's not the industry, it's not the market, it's you.
Well, yeah, for sure. Yeah, no question. 50%, that's a big number. That's not what we're talking about. But yeah, there's some things that, I think are great takeaways that you could, implement in the restaurant and just to kind of, whether it be, innovation or different stuff, but basically what they're talking about with the consumers, there's some economic uncertainty. You obviously have tariffs, which are a big thing this year. New president comes in, makes some decisions for probably more long-term, goals and things. But that short-sighted, had a lot of impact.
Immediate impact.
Yeah, for sure. So, tariff pressure, there's definitely some sentiment against that. Volumes down across retail and food service, as consumers buy just what they need. This is in quotes what they're saying. Based on the data, people are more, instead of indulging, they're buying just what they need to get by. One other thing that I thought was very interesting, Brian, is that they talked about return to the office. So while work from home is still very prominent, there is many more companies, whether they're forcing or just, requiring more days at an office. That has changed the consumer in the sense of, lunch business, whether it's delivery to the office versus home, if they're actually taking lunches, those kinds of things, and that impacting the demand.
I think that's a real thing. I think that is, one, it's a way to reduce workforce because if you force someone to come to the office as opposed to working at home, I think they're going to say, hey, I want to find a job that I can work remotely. Mm-hmm. And it's a way to reduce headcount. So it's an involuntary layoff.
Yep, no question. So one thing that I thought was interesting when you start looking at retail performance by industry, last year, if you remember when I reviewed this talk with everybody last year, this category called prestige beauty was the leading percentage up. And the reason that was that we're not going out to eat as much. We're not maybe spending, again, you're just spending things on what you need, but the prestige beauty being maybe the little bit of higher end cologne or the makeup or the skincare or the lotions or different things like that, you're spending money on because you're kind of treating yourself. You want to make yourself, you're like, okay, this is, I'm going to make myself smell good, look good, whatever it is, because you're not spending a bunch more money on that kind of disposable income that you might have had. Prestige beauty this year, while it's up 3%, was actually the fourth one down. So that was the highest last year, but now it's down to the fourth. The highest increase by 15% was video games.
Really?
And the second was toys. Okay. And then 3 and 4 was mass beauty and prestige beauty. Mass beauty being more commodity stuff, and then prestige being more like higher end. So it's still very heavy in the treating yourself kind of thing. But I thought the video games was interesting. There's, I think there's probably some advantages that people looked at, that those companies looked at online gaming and different things like that. So again, as you get into, the metaverse and different things that might happen with alternate reality, or whatever that's going to look like, I think that there's maybe not for the local independent, but there's definitely some national chains looking into that. So as your virtual avatar is out there in the world, like they're visiting like restaurants, and that the brand and things like that is a prominent thing. They kind of spoke to that a little bit.
Oh, I think I look at it maybe a little different as to consumer behavior, and that consumer, does that lend itself to third-party delivery, to go, like what is that lifestyle of a gamer, so to speak? And is there an opportunity to lean into that and really, whether it's to cross promote or to do something where, you have a gamer package, and I don't know what a gamers eat, but like, is it, here's.
Well, I think also you have these gamers that are, YouTube and Twitch and all these places where people are actually watching people play games, which is interesting because my 8-year-old son does a little bit of that with YouTube. Yeah, he's watching people play whatever it is, if it's Roblox or whatever the games are, and I've noticed that when those influencers or gamers, whatever you want to call them, are speaking about brands that they're probably getting endorsed. All of a sudden my son's like, oh, we got to get KFC or we got to get this or whatever because the this gamer he watches said it. You know what I mean? So like, and I got to admit, there's times where it's like, okay, he's talking about KFC like 20 times a week. Like, well, let's get it. You know what I mean? So it's actually affected the spend in my house personally, not hugely, but I mean, we made purchases that I would have never made based on that. So, that's part of it too, potentially.
That's interesting because it's a dynamic generational shift because when I was a kid, we didn't play a ton of video games, but I never wanted to watch someone else play a video game. I was waiting for my turn to play the video game or to play against somebody.
Well, if you're watching somebody, they were sitting right next to you. Yeah, but it is, and I can't quote to what the industry is, but it's a huge deal. I mean, there's, one thing they expressed was flat is the new normal, okay, but not everywhere, okay. So even though that, like, I struggle to get that out because it's like that's we're used to high growth and doing things and making things happen. The 24 and 25 have been very flat years in the industry.
I would say what I've seen, and even my own personal life, with inflationary pressures, you're seeing the consumer and myself spend less. I shouldn't say that. Spend the same, but I'm not spending more.
Correct. Yeah, and I think the opportunity, and this is what I want to try to drive home, is like they're suggesting, they're expecting, I should say, that the demand of the restaurant traffic is going to be basically like between 0 and 0.2, so basically flat through 2027.
Wow.
Okay. Now I look at that and I go, you could be like, oh, that sucks, but like my thing is like, okay, that's an opportunity for an operator to really get busy doubling down on the things that make them great, make them unique. And when somebody's going to spend their money, they're going to spend it with you and not somebody else. So to be able to differentiate yourself, and there's some things we'll talk about, innovation and stuff like that, and some trends that you really got to get on. You can't just do the same old stuff because people want different. They want,
Well, and I see that too. So you're not going to get this ginormous increase or influx of customers. So how are you treating those current customers, and are you upselling?
Sure.
Yeah, if you're not asking the person if they'd like a drink with that, if they would like to try a dessert, or you're not constantly training your staff to upsell, you could have a down year.
No question. Yeah, I think one thing that was interesting in that was fast casual and fine dining were the only growth segments in the restaurant. And I thought it was interesting that fine dining actually had a pretty large clip. I'm trying to find it. Was up 5%. It was actually the largest increase in foot traffic, with fast casual being at 2%, and then a segment they called non-commercial at 1%. But that I thought that was interesting. To see those increases. Mid-scale being down 5%.
Because I think that's where we're at. We're at the two ends of the spectrum.
Yeah.
You're not going to go. You're not going to maybe go have the $100 dinner as much as you would in the past. You're either going to go fast casual, or you're actually going to go to a nice restaurant.
Yeah. Yeah, and that could be the thing. Instead of going out 2 or 3 days a week, you're going to go out one. But the one you're going out, you want that experience, you want that upper scale, ability. So how can you get that into your restaurant and do maybe better weekend features where you've got higher end seafood or steak or things that are going to draw those people in because they're going to go out once on Saturday or Friday night and they need to pick you. Otherwise, that money's going somewhere else, Yeah,
and I think you give them the opportunity to splurge. One thing that I learned when I was in Vegas a couple weeks ago for a conference, there was multiple restaurants we went to that had a $500 steak on the menu.
Wow. Yeah.
Now, I don't think that's like a one and done. Like you're gonna eat the steak by yourself. But what people were doing, we're getting table stakes. Like, all right, everyone's gonna get whatever they want for dinner, and then we're also gonna get a $500 steak for
we're gonna get
table.
the 64-ounce tomahawk that we share between 4 people or whatever. Yeah,
because it makes a great picture. People ask like where did you go? Where'd you have that? Like. Or have you went any place interesting lately? And you're like, I went to this place in Vegas and it had a $500 steak.
Yeah, and then when that person you're talking to goes to Vegas next, they're probably looking for that. Yeah, you know what I mean? No question. The
table next to us, it was a young couple, and they got the $500 steak to split. Yeah, I couldn't believe it. I was like, it was so much food. I'm like, I don't know what you're doing after this, but I guarantee it involves sleeping.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah, sure. So a couple other things I think that are affecting the volume that I thought were interesting. There's per capita calories are down slightly, like calories consumed.
Ozempic.
And there's that was my next point. Okay. You read my notes. Calories are down slightly, and consumption shifts to more proteins and away from snack and alcohol. So people are trying to be a little bit more healthy. They're not snacking as much. They're maybe not drinking as much. They're shifting to more protein forward, things, which is causing obviously, calories, to reduce. GLP-1, those types of
cheater
things.
drugs.
Yeah, exactly.
There are a lot of cheater drugs out there.
So they characterize those users as spending 1% less in retail and F&B than non-users. Now you say, okay, it's 1%. But when you look at that trend and is the amount of people that are using that, 1% of, is a big number. When you start looking at the volume.
It is a big number. And you also have to look at, I think something interesting there was the alcohol side of things. And that's another generational switch away from the bucket of beers to people may have a weed pen in their pocket and they're not purchasing anything from you. Yeah. They already got their buzz.
Yeah, or the restaurants are really doing a good job now with mocktails. I mean, you're being offered those like way more than I ever heard. It's like, hey, can we get you a drink? We also have these mocktails. I mean, they're still probably similar priced. I mean, to be honest with you, for the restaurant end of it, they're probably making way more profit because you're taking the alcohol out of it, which is really the cost, and you're charging a very similar price to a regular cocktail. So you go back and it's like, okay, what's the opportunity in that for the restaurant?
It seems pretty good.
Yeah, not bad. So one thing they talked about was independence, because there's a little bit more fast casual, that's gaining some volume. How do you, as an independent restaurant, act more like a fast casual in your menu engineering, in your dine-in experience, and doing that, and giving the people the ability to come in during the week and get food fast and easy and maybe less expensive, and then have, again, those opportunities on the weekend when people are really looking. And we've talked about this for a long time. Yeah. This is not a new thing to do, but could you really double down on this to capture the volume?
And I think you have to. The consumer has shifted their buying habits, and if you don't recognize it and address it, like if you're the pasta place, you better figure it out. Yeah, because it may be smaller plates and it may be more protein,
and it still could be pasta. The thing is that like when those restaurants that you've gone to a lot, and you're maybe a regular or a frequent diner there, and the menu never changes.
Never.
Like you get to a point where you're like, okay, I like this place, but man, Like, could I get something new? Like, it just, you know what I mean? Like, and especially,
I've had everything on this menu.
yeah, you know what I mean? You know, I've had everything, and there's only really two things that I like because it's just, you know, maybe one, or it's like it's just a struggle. I'm not even craving it anymore, you know, because there's just no innovation. So I think that could be, you know, that could be a miss. You
got 10 things on your entree menu, and you know, 2 of them you don't execute well. Like replace it. Like I love pork chops. Pork chops hard to make. If you don't execute it at a high level, take it off your menu, put something else on.
Yeah. Well, it goes back to being a consumer of your restaurant. Go in, order the food, try it. If you're not wowed by it, what are you doing? You know what I mean? Because sometimes, like, we get caught up in, like, everybody wants, you want to read your POS and you want to be emotional about items that don't really sell. Like, get the data, figure out why the data's, I mean, if you're not selling any pork chops and you're like, well, the pork chops, that's what I started my restaurant with and that's what we're about. Okay, well, why don't you eat it? Yeah, because maybe it's not good. Maybe
the consumer doesn't think so.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're not replacing it with nothing. You're not 80/60 it and you know, having a blank spot on your menu.
Right.
You're trying to put something else there that's going to drive more gross profit.
Sure. Yeah, no question. So they talk a little bit about what's working in fast casual. They're saying that on-premise traffic in fast casual is actually up, which makes sense to me because, you know, obviously we're coming into more, I think third-party delivery kind of like spiked. I think people, you know, are still doing it. It's expensive, and you go back and you're like, okay, how much are people doing third party instead of going out to eat? So maybe instead of dining out 3 times, they're doing third party delivery 2 times, and then they got the dinner out once, but they're not, you know, they're probably not third party delivering a steak dinner. You know what I mean? No, they're doing more fast casual. So as that kind of like settles in, it makes sense that the on-premise and fast casual grew, you know.
I think like the fatigue from tipflation, your episode.
Yeah, great episode.
But I think there's third-party fatigue.
Yeah.
And people just realize, like, all right, I'm paying $6 more a person for this, and it's, you know,
I'm finding myself a lot more like ordering online and picking it up.
100%.
You know what I mean? And
I did that last night on the way home.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we're still, you know, doing this kitchen remodel. So I'm definitely,
you're eating out a lot.
I'm bucking the trend here. Yeah.
Brian's spend is not down, Brian.
My spend is way up.
Yeah.
But ordered online.
Yeah.
And you know, I was kind of testing
at the in-store price. You know what I mean? You're like, okay, I'm not going to pay the inflated price. I'm just going to swing by and grab it.
And maybe I have a little bit more forethought of my choices where I don't just get home and say, all right, what are we going to DoorDash?
Right.
I know it's going to be, you know, 6
o'clock.
About
that time.
Yeah, it's 6, 7 o'clock. I'm going to be home. Like, why don't I pick something up on the way?
Yep, no question. So you got that, the on-premise traffic. They talk about, you know, again, the protein, people wanting more protein. So beef entrees are up, chicken strips are up. So you notice like McDonald's launched chicken strips, some other, you know, big concepts launched chicken strip things. And then
where can you go with that on your menu? You know, can you have a heavy protein, you know, entree and market it to that?
Yeah.
You know, where it's the chicken and beef combo, where it's both grilled and you're not deep frying, and you know, I think you can charge a premium.
Yeah. No, I agree. And so those things are up. I think there's also a category they called labeled as healthy is up 7%. So I think
I like how that's a little catch-all. Like labeled as healthy.
Yeah, labeled as healthy. We'll go through. I think a little bit later I actually have the call-outs of like what those labelings are and like how they're being bought. But which is kind of interesting.
This is the healthiest deep fried chicken.
Right. Yeah. Whatever that is. You know, and I think there's like heart healthy and there's some other stuff. We'll talk about it. But so leaning into protein. Making your dining room more enjoyable. You know what I mean? So I think like as on-premise goes up and people have maybe that third-party fatigue and they want to come in, like, do you have a nice, comfortable ambiance and experience and those types of things? Are you handling your malt properly?
Yeah.
Music, ambiance, lighting, temperature.
Another great episode. But what does your, back to what your statement was about be the consumer. When the DoorDash person is coming in and you're driving a lot of traffic through third-party delivery and that slows down, what is the experience of the pickup customer? Mm-hmm. They're not just some DoorDash person that, you know, is not making the buying decision.
Right.
This person is making the buying decision, and is it clean? I can just go story after story of takeout recently. But we got Chinese food, and I was, it was very authentic in the sense of old school Chinese food place. And,
Extra MSG, extra.
yeah, extra MSG, and they gave me all our to-go food in a Tyson's Chickens box. So I was like, oh, I know what you buy. Like I know, like it's
The distributor sticker still on it. Like, I know who you buy from too.
Yeah, it had everything. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. I prefer something that didn't have poultry in it. In my to-go boxes, But I was like, okay, it's interesting. But the place wasn't very clean.
Yeah.
No, I didn't rush home and tell my wife like, don't eat
you should have seen this place. Yeah.
Yeah, but like the food was delicious. But I'm not rushing back there.
Yeah. No question. So there was this is interesting. So this is they talked about, they actually tracked in earnings calls of these national chains.
Okay.
The percentage of companies mentioning certain words.
Oh, nice.
This was very interesting. So
and no one had to actually listen to it.
Yeah, I'm sure that.
They just uploaded every
I'm sure a guy named Joe was on the phone like marking tally, and
like days in prison, like
exactly
5 down.
Yeah. So number one mention at 100% of the earnings calls. 100% of them.
Do you think all the CEOs get together and say, "Hey, I'm gonna mention this"?
Maybe. What is it? But the word was value. Okay.
Okay.
Next word, innovation. Okay.
Okay.
And then inflation and tariffs, which obviously, just supply chain. They're talking about that.
Well, if we're playing earnings call a drinking game, like someone's intoxicated.
Oh my God! If you roll value, you're done. You're done.